road again.
Ray Ambler Sr., A Celebration of Life. A note before we begin. We wanted to stand up and share these stories personally, but not one of us can get through it without crying. And not just a little cry. It is the ugly cry. When one of us goes, we all go. So we thought we would share an audio story instead. Dad loves stories told this way, so sit back. Relax. Let us tell you about Ray Ambler Sr., where it all began. Ray was born in Bremerton, Washington, to Frances Eveline and Alan Harry Ambler, the second youngest of a large, lively family of 7. Warren, Relma, Barbara, Dottie, Chuck, Ray, and Dino, in that birth order. His sister Dottie was one of his closest siblings, older, steady, and in many ways a mother figure to him. His younger brother Dino and his wife Dawn had a bond with Ray and Barbie that only deepened with time. They traveled together, stayed close, and were there for one another through everything. We recently made the trip to Washington for Dean's own celebration of life, and got to see so much of that side of the family we had not seen in a while. The Ambler side of the family mattered deeply to Ray. The sense of where he came from never left him. Staying connected was just who he was. He was a studious young man who even attended boarding school, and that early foundation set him on the path of the responsible, disciplined person we all knew. He served in the Army from June 19, 1964, to June 18, 1968, traveling through Africa and Ethiopia. Those were some of his favorite years of his life. Dependable. Showing up. It was also where he picked up his love of photography. He met Barbie. In May of 1967, Ray was stationed at Two Rock Ranch Station in Petaluma when an Army buddy owed him money. He came to San Luis Obispo to collect at a party, and that is where he met Barbara Victoria Santos, a native of Arroyo Grande. And that was that. They wrote letters back and forth, him at Two Rock Ranch, her at Grandma Ruth's house in Arroyo Grande. Somewhere between those pages and postmarks, they fell completely in love. Truth be told, according to those love letters, he was smitten from the start. Blonde hair and hot pants. And as he himself said, it started out as lust, but turned into love. 3 months later, on June 25, 1967, they eloped to Reno, Nevada, and were married at the Rosebud Wedding Chapel. Barbara wore an avocado green lace dress over yellow satin with a large-brimmed yellow hat and a matching corsage. After the ceremony, they traveled to Seattle to visit his family, who hosted a reception for them. They returned to Arroyo Grande on the 4th of July, and then headed back to Two Rock Ranch, where their life together officially began. Grandma Ruth was not exactly thrilled about how quickly it all happened. She was the matriarch, bossy, the undisputed head of the family. And she gave everyone a hard time. Everyone, that is, except Ray. Somehow, he was the one person she softened for. She knew a good man when she saw one. By the end, she was proud to call him her son-in-law, Ray Jr. Not long after Reno, Ray Jr. arrived. And just like that, they were a family. If you have ever stood next to Ray Jr. and a photograph of his father at the same age, you understand something immediately. The resemblance is not just physical, though it is striking. It is in the posture, the expressions, the quiet way of holding a room without demanding it. Even their handwriting looks the same. There are moments when you look at Ray Jr. and you see his father so clearly it takes your breath away. Their relationship was the kind that does not always announce itself loudly. Dad was not a man who wore his emotions on the outside. But the pride was always there. You could see it in the way he watched his son, the way he trusted him, the way he leaned on him in the later years, not because he had to, but because Ray Jr. had earned it. They were cut from the same cloth, and they both knew it. He turned out to be an amazing man. That is not something that happens by accident. It happens because of who raised him. Then came Stacy. 1970 brought them their baby girl, Stacy. The 4 of them lived in the village of Arroyo Grande on Ide Street. Stacy was a daddy's girl from the beginning, and stayed that way for the rest of his life. They shared a sarcastic, witty sense of humor, the kind that could fill a room with laughter before anyone else even saw the joke coming. They shared the love of trains, the love of audiobooks, and a way of moving through the world that was more alike than either of them probably ever said out loud. In Stacy's early years, she struggled with asthma, which meant a lot of doctor visits and a lot of time at home. Dad was in college then, and those quiet hours together built something between them that never went away. The hole he leaves in her life is not the kind that fills. Margaret, Bert, and Donnie. While working at Sambo's in Arroyo Grande, Ray and Barbie found their people. Margaret and Bandy. Mom and Margaret were pregnant at the same time, Bert and Ray Jr. arriving into the world together, and their bond was immediate. Best friends from then on? The four kids were inseparable. The four amigos. When Margaret and Bandy's paths eventually diverged, the Amblers followed Margaret to Arizona. Ray Jr. remembers those Arizona years with a laugh. He and Bert and Donnie and the kids were always outside, always moving. Ray Sr. was not exactly built for organized sports. One afternoon, they played football at the elementary school in Phoenix, and he tripped and landed directly on a sprinkler head. Separated his shoulder. That was not the only time. He seemed to find a way to get hurt every time they played. As the kids tell it, Ray Sr. did not get the sports gene. It looks like Race got all of it. But they had fun in other ways. Floating down the river. Jumping off cliffs. Sledding. Finding their version of adventure wherever they could. Margaret and the boys remained a beloved constant in the family, long after geography changed their circumstances. A piece of those early years when friends become family. When it was time to come back to California, the family did what families do. They landed at Grandma Ruth's house in Arroyo Grande, got back on their feet, and started again. Tammy. In 1984, Tammy joined the family. She was our cousin who needed a new place to call home, and Ray and Barbie simply opened the door. That is who they were. There was no big announcement, no drawn-out conversation about what it would mean. Someone they loved needed them, and that was enough. Dad handled it the same way he handled most things. He did not make a big production of it. He simply made space. He stepped back, let her find her footing, and was there when she needed him. Steady and consistent without pressure or expectation. The kind of father who lets you figure out who you are, while never letting you wonder for a single second whether you are loved. They eventually bought their first home together in Grover Beach. 3 kids. Their own house. A real foothold. Handle it. If you want to understand Ray Ambler, understand this. He and Barbie worked. They both worked full-time, sometimes more. They went to school, raised kids, and kept the lights on. There was no complaining. There was no dramatic announcement. There was just, this needs to get done, so we are going to do it. Ray was the first person in his family to graduate from college, earning his Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo period, and then exactly 10 years later, on June 19th, 1982, he walked across that stage again and received his Master of Business Administration. First in his family. Twice from Cal Poly. Exactly 10 years apart. The man who gave everything a deadline apparently gave himself one too. Education mattered. Showing up mattered. If you told Dad you were going to do something, he wanted to know when. And he would hold you to it. He was not perfect, he would be the first to tell you that. But when he got it wrong, he apologized. He modeled accountability before any of us had a word for it. Case in point, the cereal incident. One morning, Stacy came to Dad and told him there were bugs in the cereal. He did not believe her. He told her to eat it anyway. She did. Bugs and all. That night, Dad poured himself a bowl and found the bugs. Weevils, as it turned out. The next morning, he got up early and made pancakes. He apologized. And then, in perfectly Ray fashion, he sat down and wrote a formal letter of complaint to General Mills. He was a funny, quirky man. The things that were just Ray. He was an early adopter of computers, so much so that it caused some friction in the marriage. Mom and her friend Brenda eventually made their peace with it and had shirts printed calling themselves the Computer Widows. He was early to everything. He loved Volkswagen. There has been a VW in this family for at least 55 years. Right from the very first car they bought when Stacy was born. He never did guilt, he always said. He made a decision, stuck with it, and it was what it was. Stoic. Steady. Always just outside, hanging back, watching, knowing exactly when to step in. If you needed him, he was a call away. He always showed up. The man who was always listening. Dad did not like television, but he was never, ever quiet inside. Growing up, there was a radio in every room of the house. Every single room? KCBX. All things considered. He read voraciously until his eyesight started to go, and when it did, he did not stop. He just adapted. Audible, podcasts. The curiosity never stopped. Just the format changed. He loved Alistair Cook's Letters from America. That voice, that unhurried way of finding meaning in the ordinary, it was exactly the kind of mind Dad admired. A man who paid attention. A man who believed the everyday was worth recording. Ray understood that instinctively. Barbie's boarding house. Ray and Barbie were a team. The most complimentary kind. Barbie was front of house, a compassionate heart in, a gift for finding people in need. Dad was back of house. He sat back, let Barbie take the reins, and trusted her completely. He did not always volunteer for it. But he showed up for it because that is what you do when you love someone. Nowhere was this more on display than the Grover Beach house in the early 1990s. Stacy had two girlfriends, Casey and Cher, who needed a place to stay. They moved in. Then Cher met two young men from New Zealand. A cousin was living there too. Ray Jr. and Tammy were in and out. At its peak, nobody was entirely sure how many people were living in that house. The place became known affectionately and officially as Barbie's boarding house. Until one day, Casey, Stacy, and Cher came home to find all of their clothes on the front lawn. Dad had reached his limit. He wanted his house back. And in his calm, matter-of-fact way, he made that known. But he never stopped letting Barbie be who she was. He never asked her to close the door on people. He just occasionally needed to reclaim the front yard. 59 years of partnership looks like that sometimes. You carry each other's weights, you laugh about it later, and you make it work. The grandchildren. In 1990, Tammy gave Ray and Barbie their first grandchild. Ryan. Dad swooped in immediately. First in line. He picked up that baby and held him face down, cradled like a football. We all looked at each other. And then we looked at Ryan. And Ryan was perfectly content, completely calm. As it turns out, it is one of the most comforting positions for a newborn. Dad just knew. Of course he did. That moment was the beginning of a bond that defined Ryan's early years. He and Grandma and Grandpa were a package deal, right up until he became a teenager and spending every weekend with your grandparents started to lose a little of its appeal. But they loved him through every phase of it and he knew it. In 1999, Ray Jr. met the love of his life, Rochelle. Rochelle brought with her the second grandchild, Kylie. And in 2000, Race arrived, Ray's number one mini-me. Grandma and Grandpa now had 3 grandchildren to love and spoil, and they took that job seriously. There was a placard above the door that said, "Grandchildren spoiled here." And boy, was that the truth. In 2001, Stacy married the love of her life, Mark, and the family grew again. Terry, Whitney, and Michelle joined the fold. And in 2006, grandchild number 7, Jake, rounded out the crew. The holidays during those years were something else. Christmas especially. The house full of noise and wrapping paper and all those faces. Dad would hang back and let Mom shine. Christmas was everything to her, the decorations, the extravagance, the whole production. It was also an open-door Christmas that included all the extended family. Mark, Christy, Bella, Carrie, Shad, and Scott, to name just a few. Dad could not have cared less about any of it. But it meant everything to her, so it became everything to him. Toward the end of his life, Dad and Rochelle grew especially close. She would cook for him during the week, checking in, making sure he was taken care of. It was a quiet, loving extension of the family he and Barbie had built. The great-grandchildren. The great-grandchildren started arriving in 2006 with Michaela leading the way. She was followed by Mason, then Eli, then Mila and Luca. 5 great-grandchildren. A whole new generation for Ray to love and hold in that very particular upside-down football carry of his. He was made for this chapter of life. The babies. The little ones. The noise and the chaos and the pure, uncomplicated joy of it. He stepped right into it the same way he stepped into everything. Quietly. Completely. With his whole heart. Kylie. Kylie became the first in her generation to earn a college degree. Dad, who had put himself through school while working and raising children, who had earned not one but 2 degrees from Cal Poly, watched with pride as his granddaughter did something he understood in his bones. And she did not stop there. She went back and earned her master's degree. Just like he did. Right before Dad passed, Kylie found out she had been offered a teaching position at Margaret Harlow Elementary School. He was gushing. There is no other word for it. For a man not given to big displays of emotion, that pride was written all over him. She carried something of him forward. And she will keep carrying it. The baker. After Mom passed in 2013, Dad made himself a quiet promise. He was going to bake for us. Every week. He would show up on weekends with something warm, cinnamon rolls, something sweet, something made with his hands, and he would drop it off. Not a big production. Just Dad at the door with baked goods and a hug. He made the best cinnamon rolls and he taught us how to make them. They were delicious. Dangerously so. It was his way of saying, I'm still here. We are still a family. I'm not going anywhere. The city of Lompoc and Capo. In the mid-1980s, Dad joined the city of Lompoc as a purchasing agent. He rose through the ranks to become head of purchasing, a role he held for nearly 40 years, surrounded by people he genuinely loved. He was proud of what he built there. Retirement did not come easy for a man who found that much purpose in showing up. He was also deeply involved in CAPO, the California Association of Public Purchasing Officials. He did not just participate, he led. And over many years, he rose through the ranks to the very top. Mom was right there with him every step of the way. Wherever Capo gathered, Ray and Barbie went. Year after year, the same wonderful people, different cities, shared experiences. In 2004, Dad became president of Capo. His installation ceremony was held aboard the Queen Mary in Long Beach. The whole family came. There were tears, of course there were tears. There was pride. His for us and ours for him. We watched him stand in front of everything he had built and receive the recognition he had earned. We were so proud of him. The train. But the real story of those Lompoc years is also how he got there every day. The train. Dad would walk to the Grover Beach Amtrak station, right around the corner from home, board the train, and ride to Lompoc. Every day. For years. And Mom would pick him up in the evening when he got back. Sometimes the train ran late. She was not entirely thrilled about that. There is reportedly a letter somewhere that confirms it. Sometimes he walked home from the station instead of calling for a ride. There is reportedly a letter about that too. He loved it so much he became an advocate. There is an actual newspaper article about Ray Ambler and his belief that rail infrastructure was essential, that any first world country had a responsibility to keep the trains running. He did not just ride the train. He believed in it. The train runs on. Dad gave Stacy the train bug. It started with a family trip up to Washington, all of them together, watching the Pacific Coast roll by from the window of an Amtrak car. The moment Stacy could walk between the cars, look out at the landscape moving underneath her, feel that particular freedom that only a train gives you, she understood it the way he understood it. She was hooked. And then Stacy passed it on to her grandson Mason. And now it is spreading to Ray's grandchildren too. The love of trains handed down like something valuable. Because it is. Dad did not pass it down quietly either. He shared it with anyone who would take him up on the offer. He was an evangelist about it. If you showed even a flicker of interest, he was ready. He had the stories. He had the knowledge. And eventually, he had the business cards. In 2015, Ray Sr. and Ray Jr. and Race boarded a train together and circumnavigated the United States entirely by rail. 3 generations of Ambler men. One extraordinary journey. Ray Jr. had business cards made up with the exact route and travel itinerary printed on them, and he would pull one out in hand at the fellow passengers as they rolled through cities and countryside together. Not just riding the train, but wanting you to understand exactly why it mattered and exactly where it had taken him. In 2023, Ray Sr. and Ray Jr. and Stacy took another trip around the country. This one carried a different kind of weight. It was 10 years after Mom passed, and they were marking it the way she would have wanted. Moving. together, watching the country go by from a window. The train has a way of bonding people like no other form of travel. Ask Stacy sometime about New Orleans. There is a story there. And in 2024, Dad took one more trip. He brought Stacy and Mark and Whitney and Mason and Mila up to Seattle by train. On that trip, Stacy and Big Ray got to visit Uncle Dino before he passed. They made it. They were there. The train took them there. That is the thing about Ray Ambler and trains. It was never just about the travel. It was about showing up. It was about the people you get there to see. 59 years. 2 kids became 3. Arizona became California. A garage became a home. A cook became a manager, became a purchasing director, became a Cal Poly graduate twice, became a capo president, a train advocate, a baker, a podcast junkie, and a man with a radio in every room and coffee bedside every morning. Mom passed in 2013, 12 years ago. It feels like yesterday and forever at the same time. Dad was stoic about it because that was Dad. He did not perform grief. He carried it quietly, the way he carried everything. And he showed up every weekend with something warm from the oven, because that was the only language for it he needed. He is with her now. And we are proud, genuinely, completely proud of both of them. They were not perfect, but they tried their best as often as they could, for as long as they could. And without the 2 of them, none of us would be here today. He was a steady hand. A constant. A kind soul, not in a showy way, just back there, quiet, unreal, where it counted most. We love you, Dad. We love you, Mom.